I can close my eyes and see it. He's taller than I thought, he's skinnier than I thought, that his beard is shorter and gray. That's his nose, that is bin Laden. He's not surrendering, he's a threat. I need to kill him.
Robert O'Neill did not hesitate for a second when he stood before the man who had murdered thousands of Americans and started one of the most brutal wars of the 21st century. The Navy SEAL, armed with his assault rifle, which he pointed at the chest of the most wanted terrorist in history, had a millisecond to debate between following his orders or seeking another kind of greater justice, the kind that only imperfect heroes know. 10 years had passed since that fateful September 2001, when Osama bin Laden catapulted himself to infamy by perpetrating the bloodiest attack ever launched against the continental territory of the United States. A few days later, with the ruins of the world still warm, the American government placed him first on the list of the most wanted criminals and began a hunt that would include 2 wars. After a decade of uninterrupted pursuit, U.S. intelligence located bin Laden in a mansion in Abbottabad. A team of Navy SEAL special operators was deployed to capture the al-Qaeda leader. But the terrorist did not feel the cold metal of the handcuffs on his hands, but his body was pierced by the hot lead of Robert O'Neill's bullets. Questioned for his actions, the Navy SEAL went down in history as both a hero and a trigger-happy man. Since that Arabian night, when bin Laden's body was thrown into the sea according to Muslim rites, Robert O'Neill has had to explain why he made the decision to execute the fugitive. This is his story.
There, so I'm excited. Yeah. And the news is on, and they said, okay, it's the 1-year anniversary of the night bin Laden was killed, so we're taking viewer email right now. The best story of where you were when you found out bin Laden was dead. Come on.
The story Robert O'Neill recalls is one worth telling. The truth is that just a year after executing Osama bin Laden, the Navy SEAL could laugh about the hard night he spent in Abbottabad. Together with 24 special operatives from DevGru, O'Neill had to go deep into the heart of Pakistan in the middle of the night. Their mission was extremely important, but if they failed, they would be left completely alone behind enemy lines. So secret was the mission that, for legal reasons, command of the entire Navy SEAL team had to be handed over to the CIA. With the US Navy and Army out of the picture, the soldiers technically functioned as spies for Central Intelligence, and there was no guaranteed rescue. There was even the possibility that if they were detected, the Air Force would not be able to provide support, since by revealing unauthorized US military action on Pakistani territory, a new war in the Middle East could begin. With both fear and hope, they all signed the highly classified documents for a mission that could make them either heroes or martyrs in the war on terror.
If we get the green light, it's a one-way mission.
So let's talk about that for a second. You thought you were going to die.
Yes.
In fact, you knew you were going to die.
I knew we weren't coming back.
And your teammates also know this as well,
yes,
right?
everyone was very...
As he traveled in the Night Stalker's Black Hawk, O'Neill reviewed everything he knew about the operation. After several failed attempts to assassinate bin Laden, the CIA had begun deploying spies throughout the Middle East. The mass murderer seemed to have vanished from public life, and locating him among terrorist camps was like looking for a needle in a haystack. On the other hand, the leader of al-Qaeda did not lack resources, neither economic nor human, and had a huge network of international political influences, as well as countless guerrillas capable of giving their lives for him. Although the investigation lasted several years, by 2010 there was already reliable information indicating that bin Laden was hiding in a complex in Abbottabad, Pakistan, where he had a mansion and a bunker. In September of that year, the CIA began an exhaustive investigation, monitoring the location via satellites and spies. Although the central building was very tall with 3 floors and was photographed from every possible angle, it could not be confirmed with certainty that bin Laden was there. However, all roads seemed to lead to Abbottabad, and leaving aside the doubts, the Central Intelligence Agency decided to bet on the place. With a toss of a coin, the US military mechanisms were set in motion. The operation would be conducted by the CIA, since the armed forces could not act in Pakistani territory without this being taken as a hypothesis of conflict. To carry out the attack, it was decided to use a small team. 79 Spec Ops belonging to DevGru, formerly known as Navy SEAL, Team 6, and special CIA teams along with a military dog called Cairo. The weapons were those corresponding to all the commandos, the HK-416 rifles as the main weapon, the Mark 48 machine guns for fire curtains, and the small MP7s for close combat. However, the DevGru troops had some hope that their superiors would not leave them alone in the worst-case scenario. According to O'Neill himself, there were some rumors of air support.
I have heard stories, and again, probably classified, I don't know the truth, but I've heard stories that they did have air support helping us get back. We didn't know that.
Didn't know it.
I knew there were jets on the border, but that's not going to help us back here. But I think if an American and an F-15 lights up a Pakistani guy and an F-16, I think he'll turn around.
According to the Marine, the rumors of F-15s or F-16s were just a hope that soldiers gave each other, murmurs that surely arose while traveling in the dark helicopters under cover of night. The truth is that they, who were going to face the bodyguards trained in Al-Qaeda training camps, had been told that they were alone. But this did not stop the brave soldiers who, having sworn to protect and avenge their country, took part in Operation Neptune's Spear that ended the life of the most dangerous terrorist in history. The troops left Jalalabad in eastern Afghanistan, using the modified Black Hawk helicopters of the Night Stalker, the legendary Special Operations and Airborne Infiltration Corps of the American Army. As he listened to the noise of the engines break the peace of the Arabian night, O'Neill scanned the faces of his men. Nerves, excitement, worry, fear. All the emotions were reflected in the faces of those warriors responsible for bringing justice to their land. The chances of success were small, but the chances of failure increased with each scenario that O'Neill imagined in his mind.
We don't know how good their air defenses are. Maybe the young kid that's very aggressive is on the radar that night. There are no checkpoints. People don't understand when you do a long-range helicopter mission, there are usually checkpoints to refuel. There are none of those. So we have to be exact with the pounds of weight that we have. So we get shot down. If anyone's going to blow himself up and his entire family when the team's in the house, bin Laden will do it.
Yeah.
Of course, the team leader kept the worst products of his imagination to himself. Not because his teammates weren't thinking the same thing, but because nothing good could come from saying it out loud. The horizon was dawning as they approached Abbottabad, and there death and glory could be waiting for them. The trip from the starting point, Jalalabad, to their destination was about 90 minutes. An hour and a half of pure tension, of chewing adrenaline while going over their training step by step. When they were recruited and entered the Red Squadron, the DevGru operators did not know the nature of the mission. They only knew that it was an extremely dangerous job, which required the exclusive participation of the most experienced Navy SEALs. What they did know was that it was a kill or be killed mission, and that the chances of failure were very high, but that the spirit of their nation was at stake. Once they signed the classified documents to participate in the mission, O'Neill and his colleagues were sent to training camps set up on American soil. These were 2 assault simulators, which had a staging of the complex where bin Laden was supposedly located. There, they practiced different possible strategies to launch the raid, infiltrating the building in the most peaceful ways to the most violent. In all cases, they had to work on situational awareness, that is, the ability to take into account everything that was happening in their surroundings. As they were fundamentalist guerrillas, each enemy movement could be treated as a suicide bomber, capable of sacrificing himself to save their leader. The first simulator was located in North Carolina, while the second practice complex was in Nevada, a strategic location since this geographical part of the United States coincides with the elevation of land, similar to that found in Abbottabad. In this way, they could train entry tactics at the same time as the deployment in the Black Hawks. O'Neill had great faith in the Night Stalkers, and thinking about them brought him back to reality, to the moment at hand, to the impending conflict. Counting the seconds until landing, he looked up at the pilot of his helicopter, whom he deeply admired.
I'm
Well,
curious.
that's where the pilots come in too, because
Okay.
they're flying very low.
Okay.
And they're flying technology that they're not You know, they've flown helicopters. They're the best four pilots in the world. And Army, I'll give Army a shout out. They have the best helicopter pilots in the world. That's what I love about the military too. The best Air Force in the world is the U.S. Air Force. The second best Air Force is the U.S. Navy.
Lost for another second in his thoughts, O'Neill came out of his stupor when he felt the helicopter stop moving. It was time for action. The Navy SEALs prepared themselves and jumped to the ground using a rope. Once in the desert, they had to move quickly. They knew that somewhere nearby there were 2 Chinook helicopters to support their escape, but turning back was no longer an option. A few meters ahead, they could see the lights of the mansion where bin Laden, the man they had been looking for 10 years, was waiting. The commandos advanced under the moonlight like a pack of hungry wolves looking for their prey. However, the first problem presented itself. The second helicopter crashed its rear rotor into one of the walls of the complex, causing an accident that almost made it crash. But the Night Stalker pilot had a trick up his sleeve and lowered the nose of the Black Hawk to avoid a catastrophe. The helicopter rested against a wall and no one was seriously injured. The second, even bigger problem was that this alerted the entire mansion's security and destroyed any chance of sneaking in quietly. Navy SEALs began blowing open the doors of the building to force their way in. With bodyguards on alert, caution had to be doubled. Any misstep could mean death. DevCrew moved quickly, splitting into teams of 2 operatives who began securing the complex from the ground floor to the upper floors. On their way, they encountered little resistance and noticed that inside the house there were mainly women and children. However, they had to continue the climb until they reached the top. O'Neill and a partner decided to move forward, knowing that anything could happen.
And then we got to the second floor, and then there's a final stairwell going up. The point man stayed there staring. You know, he's gonna keep point, keep security, and other guys are gonna clear the second floor because you don't want to move past it, clear that. And then that's everyone in front of me, and I'm the last guy. I ended up what we call the 2-man. So the 1 man's there, I'm the 2-man, and that's when I put my hand on his shoulder because his job was to look forward, my job was to look behind us.
Even though his entire body was telling him he was going to die, O'Neill squeezed his partner's shoulder. "We have to move on." After climbing the stairs, they pulled back the curtain that separated them from the 3rd floor. Inside the central room was a group of women. O'Neill's partner charged at the group, fearing they were suicide bombers. O'Neill entered later, seeing that nothing had exploded, and at that moment his blood ran cold. Robert O'Neill executed Osama bin Laden with 3 shots to the head. According to the Navy SEAL, the 3rd bullet was just to make sure he was dead. Still pumped up by adrenaline, the workers secured the place, moving away the women and children, whom they handcuffed with plastic tape. From that moment on, Robert O'Neill knew his life had changed forever. He was aware that his actions would be questioned, but he was certain that he had chosen the path of justice, especially to protect his comrades. Once the return trip was completed, the Navy SEALs celebrated their bravery. They had achieved what thousands of soldiers had failed to do in a decade: eliminate the most wanted man in the world, the genocidal maniac who had ended the lives of almost 3,000 Americans. But there was still work to be done, as they had to identify the body and notify their superiors. 24 hours later, after confirming the identity of the terrorist leader and coordinating with the government of Saudi Arabia, bin Laden was thrown into the sea, according to the Muslim rite. The pertinent rituals were performed, and the American forces assured that the decision was related to the fact that no country wanted to accept the remains of the former head of Al-Qaeda. Although Operation Neptune's Spear was known worldwide, O'Neill's identity was kept secret until the SEAL himself decided to tell his version of the events. He first did it anonymously with Esquire magazine in 2013, until after several interviews, his name was leaked in 2014. Since then, Robert O'Neill has revisited the death of the United States' greatest enemy, although some of his former colleagues have denied that he was really the killer of bin Laden. The American government has never confirmed or denied the story of the Navy SEAL, who has become very popular in his country, where he travels offering lectures and motivational talks. Although the years have passed, the story of the most important hunt of the 21st century continues to captivate the public, both those who consider O'Neill a hero and those who believe that he acted rashly in an act of revenge unworthy of a true Marine. Thank you very much for following us to the end. If you like our content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.